We are just a day away from Big 12 football. Chris Ross from the Land Grant Gauntlet joins us to discuss the conference and the big matchups on week one. Chris, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. Football, Big 12 football, 2 days away. Oklahoma State at Tulsa. Tulsa at Oklahoma State. I should reverse that. Super excited for it, though.
Yeah, we got a little glimpse last weekend, but most of the big boys in action this weekend. So let's get started. The Thursday night affair isn't huge, but at the same time, Tulsa's been a pretty respectable program, losing most of its offensive weapons, though, going up against Oklahoma State. And I keep hearing that the Cowboys are a dark horse for the college football playoff, maybe under the elite class of, the 4 or 5 teams that get discussed all over the place. Maybe they could be considered a dark horse, but for me, that's not a dark horse. They're a top 10 team, and they're one of 2 selections that most people are making out of the Big 12.
Yeah, definitely. Oklahoma State, they have really high expectations for what they can be this year. I think for those around the program, this team kind of reminds them a lot of the 2011 team with Brandon Whedon and Justin Blackman and those guys. And we know what they did. They were a hair's breadth away from the college football championship game, voted out in favor of Alabama. But that's the kind of team that they think they have there in Stillwater. Tulsa, on the other hand, is a very capable team. Won 10 games last year, including a huge win over Central Michigan, who controversially beat Oklahoma State last year, whether Gundy wants to admit that or not. So definitely a very high profile, not high profile, but a good matchup. It's better than I think people think. In-state rival. It's now what are they calling that? The Turnpike Classic. Not my favorite name. Reminds me of kind of like a basketball matchup. I don't like the name, but other than that, it's kind of it kind of shows you where Tulsa is as a program. To be honest, they're growing, they're getting bigger. To be able to schedule kind of a sponsorship game like Bank of Oklahoma is sponsoring with that matchup there on Thursday, and then I think I don't think they play next year, but I think they play through 2021 in that matchup. So that'll be key. But as far as the game itself, Oklahoma State, they have to come out and take care of business. If they want to realize any of their other goals of winning the Big 12, maybe a shot at the college football playoff, they have to take care of business against Tulsa. Tulsa will have a decent offensive line, one of the better ones in the AAC, so something to look at.
Yeah, when people mention Turnpike as a term, it doesn't necessarily conjure up memories of anything special or significant or anything in regards to something desirable. So they may want to rethink that down the road. But once the people turn on the TV and get in the stadium, I don't think there's much thought given to that. They want to see a competitive football game, of course, unless they're rooting for the Cowboys, a 17-point favorite. Mike Gundy's won Big 12 championship, so he has definitely made his impact on this program, bringing it from the Les Miles era and what was accomplished during those times into national prominence and a consistent top 15 ranking in recent years. But the one Big 12 championship was the one that you alluded to, 2-9 against Oklahoma. So that's going to be the measuring stick once again this year, and it may be the measuring stick twice.
Yeah, the matchup with Oklahoma will be big for Oklahoma State. To kind of tease maybe something I'm working on behind the scenes, we talked a lot about last night with my staff, is looking at Oklahoma State. Have they kind of filled the void that Texas has left open as a flagship of the Big 12? Now, nobody is saying blue blood because there's only a handful of blue bloods, but as a flagship program, kind of like a Clemson or an Oregon, has Oklahoma State filled that role? Over the last 11 years, since Texas won the 2005 national title, Oklahoma State has the better record over the last 11 years. They're averaging over 9 wins for over a decade. That's pretty good for a program. I mean, they got close to the national championship game in 2011. They made a statement win last year. Big things expected this year. And so it's kind of but for the program to get to that level, I think the Oklahoma game is huge. They can't continue to lose that game. They have to show that they can compete with the Sooners. And I think this year would be key for that, especially if they make a playoff run. If they do, then I think it's time to have that conversation about whether or not Oklahoma State is a flagship.
And Chris, I would say that to make that statement or have any thoughts of making that statement to get into the Florida State USC ranks, you can't call Colorado State in the Alamo Bowl a statement game.
No, no. And every program has its down years. I mean, Oklahoma, even though they've been the class of the Big 12, they've had a couple of down years, right, where they've lost 5 games, in a season. And no one's saying that Oklahoma State is always good, but it's over the length of time, especially in just the history of the Big 12, the last 20 years. Well, for over half of that, Oklahoma State's been the better program compared to Texas. Now, we know Texas has been down the last few years, but that includes the national championship run that Texas made in 2009. They lost in the championship game, but that's not saying that. I guess what I'm saying there is Texas hasn't always been bad during that run. So the fact that Oklahoma State still averages higher is kind of a statement in itself. But you're right. They're not Florida State. They're definitely not Oklahoma. They're not Texas. They're not USC. They're not Ohio State. They're not Alabama. But are they Oregon? Are they Clemson? And should we start having that conversation? That's kind of our angle from it. That's kind of what I was looking at. I think recruiting is a big thing. They have to consistently get 4 and 5 star guys, at least a couple 5-star guys. And then again, the matchup with Oklahoma, that would be their biggest knock.
I would say that they don't want to be Oregon right now. We'll see what Willie Taggart has in store for the Ducks and what kind of rebound we see.
But if you think of Oregon in the Pac-12, when you think of Pac-12, or at least when I think of Pac-12 being here in the Midwest and in Big 12 country, I think of USC, Stanford, and Oregon as the class of the Pac-12. No, never mind that they won 4 games last year. I mean, I understand that, but that goes back to everybody has a down year, but they still have that, in my mind, they still have that level of, no matter how bad they did last year, overall, the last decade, whenever they beat Oklahoma, they've kind of ascended to the next level of college football.
Yeah, I would not consider Oklahoma State to be in the class of Oregon circa 2000, roughly 2007 until 2015, going to 2 national championships, going to BCS bowl games at the time, and finishing in the top 5 in the country. But I think they're close. They're on the cusp of that if they continue to progress. Clemson, I think, is another deal. They're almost in their own category. Are they elite? Well, based on the last 2 or 3 years, yes, they're elite. I would like to see it sustained, but they really jumped to the elite. They went to national championship games, so it was kind of a 7-5, 8-4 kind of program as Dabo Swinney took over, and then suddenly they're defeating LSU's and Ohio State's in bowl games, and then bam, they win national championships and go to national championship games. So they need to sustain it. We shall see, but things look good at Clemson.